Casey, welcome, man. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here because you are somebody who I've seen here and there over the past 5-6 years, probably just been in the same space and in the same ideas. And I've followed a bunch of entrepreneurs before, and it's cool to finally meet you after hearing so much about you for so long.
Absolutely. You as well, man. I've loved seeing your show and what you're doing, so super excited to be here today, and thanks so much for having me on.
Hell yeah. So I figured we'd start with Cardone and Miami. I think this is the story that describes you so well, and I think it's just an incredible way to start off the podcast to let people know who you are.
100%. I love that story. So, I've had my podcast now it'll be 5 years in December, and I've done over 400 interviews now. Larry King, Rick Ross, Elon Musk's mom and sister, a lot of cool people. And, I don't say those names lightly because I was once in my bedroom when I was 17 years old in Virginia, just on a pair of Apple headphones, trying to start a podcast and meet people on social media, right? And really, the story with Grant Cardone and how I interviewed him, he was someone that I looked up to for many, many years. I was following him. I saw what he was doing. His content was awesome. And I remember it was one of the first interviews I did where I had to really get creative with it. I was still in high school. I think I was a junior then. And I reached out to Grant on Instagram DMs and I said, hey, Grant, would love to have you on the show. Here's my show, a little bit about it. He's like, cool, email my assistant. So I email her and I say, hey, Tina, whoever it was, Grant told me to email you. Would love to have him on the show. I'm going to be in Miami next Wednesday and Thursday. Would love to make the show happen in person. If not, we can, of course, do it on Zoom, whatever works best for Grant. And, the funny part about this story is I never, A, have ever been to Miami before that. And B, I had no plans to go to Miami. And I was just, throwing it out there in the universe. And I was going to figure out a way to get down there if they were to say yes. And I did not think they would. And she's like, cool, next Wednesday at 3 p.m. works great. See you at the studio. Here's the address. So now I'm in high school. I'm like, okay, let me go, tell my mom I'm going to Miami next week. Go get some buddies of mine. We'll fly out there from Virginia. My business partner now, Kieran. And then I go down to Miami, do the interview with Grant Cardone in the studio, tell him this story live on the show. He, laughed at it, thought it was funny. But I just think, the thesis of that story and why I love telling it and so happy you brought it up is because I think that figuring out how to put yourself in positions to win and to create opportunity starts by getting creative with how you think about things, right? Whether that's doing an interview, whether that's showing up at an event, whether that's putting out a piece of content where you want to reference something that maybe someone would like. And I think that story was funny and exciting, and that interview definitely impacted me in terms of how I was able to go about setting it up.
Yeah. And you obviously interviewed Larry King, as you said, too, and you had a kind of a similar situation happen to him before you actually interviewed him that people might not know, where you see him and have to make a split-second decision of, am I going to go up to him right now? This is before the interview. Yeah. So, tell us about that and, what gives you the confidence to just do it and get in the arena where most people often don't?
Yeah, man. My interview with Larry King definitely has impacted me in many, many ways beyond just the interview itself, whether it comes to my relationship with his son, Chance, the moment before I interviewed him that I now reflect on that I'll get to here in a second. There's so much that went into the timing of that interview with his life where, unfortunately he passed away. Rest in peace to Larry King. But I was one of the last people to ever interview him. And the day he passed away, I got a DM from BBC World News on Twitter. I went live on BBC World News. They were asking me, how has Larry impacted your life? We loved your interview. What did you learn from him? And just the timing of it it was so rare that I had that opportunity. But going back to the point of, self-confidence and walking up to someone, the story goes, one of my good friends, Michael Greene, he invited me to a dinner with Tillman Fertitta, who's the owner of the Houston Rockets, and it was all these other creators that helped Tillman promote his book when he published it back in 2019. And it was, probably 20 to 30 people in the room. And my business partner, Kieran, and best friend, he ends up sitting down next to Chance King. And, it's awesome room of networking, meeting great people. And towards the end of the night, Tillman was going around the table, everyone introducing themselves. And he's like, Chance, it was such a pleasure being in your father's show today. Tell him I said hello. It's always great seeing you. So I'm like, oh, that's super cool. Larry King's son, Chance. Go up to him, introduce myself. We hit it off. I was having an event the following weekend with Drama from Young and Reckless and his cousin Rob Dyrdek, this big speaking event in LA. This was back in 2019. So I invited him to it the following weekend. He came, he checked it out, and we just started building this relationship. And then the ironic part about all of this, as you mentioned, is the following weekend, I was in LA, wasn't living there yet. I was at the Century City Mall and just there for whatever, maybe dinner or whatever it was. And I'm walking around the corner and I see Larry King just roll right by in his wheelchair. He's with two other people, rolls right by. And, you have moments where you're like, wow, like, should I go say something? Maybe not. Like, we all have that, whether that's someone that you admire or someone that you may know or you think you know. Like, there's that split-second decision that you have to make. Like, do I go introduce myself and do I get a picture, whatever it is. So I walked by and it was definitely more than a split second. It was a couple seconds, maybe 10, 15 seconds where I'm like, all right, here goes nothing. Walk up there by myself, just introduce myself to him. It's late at night. And I said, Larry, I just met your son Chance a couple weekends ago. He's phenomenal. I just wanted to say I admire your work. I've hosted my podcast at the time, for probably 3 years, and just you're an inspiration, and would love it. I just wanted to say hello. And he's very kind, very friendly. We're talking, we're chatting. Get a quick selfie with him, send it to Chance, and it's all just like good energy, right? Yeah. And in that moment, and in months prior, I think that was in October of 2019. I ended up interviewing Larry in December. Wow. There was this probably 6 to 8 week window where I brought up to Chance, a couple weeks after we met, like, it would be such an honor to have your dad on the show sometime. But at the time, he was just coming out of a stroke. He wasn't doing the best. I was obviously in a wheelchair. So it just wasn't good timing. And then right around Thanksgiving, I'm sending a bunch of messages to people that I say Happy Thanksgiving to. And Chance is like, I spoke to my dad. He would totally be interested. I told him a little bit about your show. Let me know when you're going to be in LA next, and I'd love to help you set it up.
You're like, tomorrow. I'm there.
Yeah, I'm there whenever you need me to be, right? This was Thanksgiving. So, late November, and we ended up doing the interview December 10th. So it was just a little under 2 weeks after that text message, but did the show with him December 10th, 2019. And for me, as someone that at the time was 19 years old, in this podcast journey for 3 years now, putting out content, it spoke to, even what we spoke about with Grant Cardone, like putting yourself in positions to create opportunity, because that wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have been at that dinner with Tillman Fertitta. And I wasn't living in LA. I had to fly out for that. And a lot of people, they don't even realize it, but there's so many opportunities that come across your plate, but you're just not acting on them. And sometimes maybe some things don't turn into anything, but if I wouldn't have gone out to that event, if I had something come up that was more important, or I was like, something's conflicting, that wouldn't have happened. And I think that I try to live in that mindset every single day, because it's easy to, get an email or get a DM saying, oh, come to this event or come to this dinner or come grab coffee, when you might not know it's going to turn into something. And I think that's the most important lesson here, is just never have an expectation of opportunities coming up. Just get out there and put yourself in a position to win, because I still live in this deep-rooted mindset of being this 17-year-old kid in my bedroom in Virginia with, no experience in the business world, no relationships, no connections, trying to figure out, like, okay, how do I move out of my parents' house? I'm not going to college. I've made that decision. I'm a junior in high school. Like, how do I do this? And I think just putting myself in those uncomfortable situations and making those decisions in the moment that, are just, you really got to trust your gut on them. I think that's really allowed me to put myself in a position to be where I am today. And I think moments like that, the Larry King situation, just, it's always great to reflect on and trying to, take that lesson learned into the journey ahead.
Yeah. And one other thing that I want to point out and highlight from that is the good energy you just put into the world coming back to you in unexpected ways. And this is something I find so often with podcasters and content creators and people in the space, that sometimes when you're not in, it doesn't come as naturally. But just like when you see Larry King and just like saying something nice to him, when you come across a piece of content you like, just liking it and writing a quick comment, like it actually means something to people. And it's important because you gain something by giving that good energy too.
Totally. 100%. I think good energy is underrated. Like, people don't, not that I don't understand, but I don't think a lot of people place a level of importance on how you just make someone feel, whether that's when you're buying coffee or talking to an Uber driver or, just waiting in line behind someone or doing a podcast. It's like your energy. And I like to say, people like to say, my business partner, let's say, is I'm a delusional optimist, right? I'm always happy. I always look at the glass half full. And that's true. I do. And do I believe that there's moments of, you have to just swallow the truth of, things aren't always positive, whether that's, death in the family or business is going under, whatever it is. Like, there's a lot of bad things that happen in life that I think we all encounter. But I truly believe, and I do this myself, I always look at the glass half full. And, whether that's running late to a meeting or getting stuck in traffic, it gives you this perspective, just always be in a good state of mind. And I think that putting that good energy in the world, as you said, not only comes back tenfold, but you just live a happier life. Like if you're someone that gets upset because your Uber canceled on you and you're running late to a meeting, like, your days, you're going to have probably more bad days than good days overall, because you let the situation reflect on how you think about it. And in reality, it's just, you got to make the most of every moment. So I try to live in that mindset. And I think that was just built over time. I think that one of my favorite books, How to Win Friends and Influence People, talking about, building relationships, knowing someone's name, whatever it may be. The act of positive thinking is very prevalent, not only in that book, but just a lot of content that I consume. And I think it's shaped me into who I am, and at least who I am today, and I think over time, I'm always going to live in that mentality.
Yeah. What happens when you're not in that mentality? And it's crazy because I've listened to podcasts of you from 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, like all different years.
Yeah.
Same energy, same guy. And I'm thinking to myself, this is incredible, one. But two, he has bad days like anybody else.
Totally.
Because you present yourself, and you probably are optimistic and positive 99% of the time, or feeling good, like talk to us about the 1% and how you transition and get to that place and where your thoughts go. Like, what does down Casey look like?
No, that's a phenomenal question. And I think, as everyone, I have bad days as many as I have good days, right? But I think the most important way I think about it is just the lens of gratitude. And that's what David Meltzer, one of my mentors, now my girlfriend's cousin, so like family, he's in the fam, right? He always talks about is just this lens of gratitude, where on some days, whether that's, I have a tech startup, we raised some money last year. It's an interesting time for.
He was the first investor.
Yeah, Yep. Dave was the first investor, and it's an interesting time in the market, right? Like people are not raising money. A lot of tech companies are doing layoffs. It's a very unprecedented economic time. Crypto is correcting heavily. Like everything's just very up in the air, especially with the industries that I am playing in. So, it's not that we're having bad days, but you need to really think about like how to put yourself in a position to win more than ever before in this current macroeconomic climate. But, on bad days, what a deal not going through, or, podcast ends up not getting as many downloads, whatever it is, like, it's interesting because I want to say I don't have bad days. I feel like I embrace them. And when I do have a bad day, I take an extra moment of time to reflect on why am I having a bad day. I try to journal a lot when I'm going through something. And I think that's more of like a self-reflection aspect of like, why do I feel this way? How do I get out of it? But
is that just a prompt? Like, do you have a journaling prompt, or is it just free flow? How does that
really
work?
Free flow. So when I write in my journal, I typically write future-based messages. So I'm like, Casey, you're currently dealing with this, but, your future self thanks you for going through this because it's made you a better man. And maybe I'll go in depth on what that is exactly. But I think just truthfully, like the lens of gratitude allows me to level out my negative energy. And when it comes to if I'm going through something very bad, and also too, just making a quick phone call, right? Like calling my mom, calling my dad, calling my brothers that are so disconnected from what I do on a day-to-day basis. I just think moments like that help me pull me up to like, okay, like my parents are both here. I'm so grateful for my health, my family, my friends, that even in the worst day, business-wise, at the end of the day, it's like there's so much to be grateful for. And truthfully, that's how I try to live my life. Like it's not that I don't have bad days, but even on my bad days, I have so much gratitude and reflect on the moment, and I embody it and try to really feel it so that I'm more grateful for the days where things are going great.
What was the start of the gratitude? I know at one point you were you couldn't move your neck basically.
Yeah, for sure. I was just about to go there. I think it's, I grew up in an area in Virginia right outside of Richmond. And, my story is when I was 15, 16 years old, I was an athlete for 10 years, played hockey, played lacrosse. And then sophomore year of high school, I was playing football. I ended up getting injured where I was in a neck brace for 6 months. I was almost paralyzed and could never play football again in my life. And not even just that moment specifically, I think built gratitude, because in the moment I was depressed. I was just angry, pissed off at the world, had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, but I knew that I couldn't play sports and that was just ripped away from me. So coming out of that injury and now getting involved with this world sort of by accident, like personal growth, self-development, picking up Think and Grow Rich and all these different books when I was 15, 16, just from following different people on social media, instilled this just entire new mindset. But where I was going with that is, the area I come from, I'm the youngest of 3 brothers. We grew up, I couldn't fly on a plane until I bought the plane ticket myself. I didn't come from this world where there was a lot of opportunity in my eyes. I knew that, like, okay, a lot of my, my friends are doing this. My brother's 6 years older than me. His friends are going to college, they're getting jobs here. We're all on social media. There's so much to see and experience, whether that's through people you follow. Just the world's a big place now, and you get to see a lot of things that you weren't able to see maybe 20, 30 years ago without technology today. So I think the gratitude just comes from like looking at, where I am today on a daily basis, where, I live in California. I have a beautiful girlfriend. I'm working on a tech startup with one of my best friends in the world. And just that perspective of like, wow, 5 years ago, I was this 17-year-old kid in high school with, more so no plan, no connections, and really no understanding of how I was going to get to where I am today or where I was going to be in 5, 10 years. I just think that perspective of growth really fulfills me on a day-to-day basis and gives me that perspective to just keep moving forward in even the hardest days. Because a lot of people, especially where I'm from, it's, people are doing the same thing. They don't get these opportunities, or they don't create them in their life. And I just think that I am grateful to have had the perspective shift when I was 15, 16 years old to say, oh, wow, like, no one's going to come into your life and give you something. You got to go work for it. You got to put yourself in positions to win. You have to go network. You have to go be in uncomfortable situations to get the outcome you want. And all of these different learnings and the trials and tribulations of just putting in that work of, taking off 80 days of school, junior and senior year, flying back and forth to LA on a Friday, coming back on a Monday, like all those things that I did, were very hard, selling my parents on letting me travel across the country when I was 17 and didn't know I was spending time with. Like all these things were so difficult that now just reflecting on where I am today, it's humbling and it makes me just excited about the future, knowing that if that can be done, like sky's the limit.
Dude, I went back and I scrolled through to your first Instagram post. And what's crazy is how you present yourself to the world just by look alone is so different. And of course this is going to be the case for people going from 17 to 22.
Yep.
But it seems even more pronounced with you. And I can't help but think it is because of the uncomfortable positions you've sought out for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, are you trying in terms of like the personal brand aspect of it all?
In terms of the personal brand, literally just how you dress. I mean, if someone's watching this on video, you could see like swagged out right now, all white, like he's got a ring, probably an Aura ring, or like a nice watch. Like, and you go back to where you were 17, maybe we'll flash it on the screen right now. It looks like a different human being. And there's a lot of people who are 17 and 22 and they look exactly the same. And it's my belief that the physical appearance is a reflection of the internal growth.
Yeah.
So like,
I appreciate that.
Like, is that true?
Absolutely. I mean, I got to say, big shout out to my lovely girlfriend, Jacqueline Burnett. I mean, the little things in like from a surface level of like, clothes or my hair is super long. I've never had hair this long ever.
It looks great.
But my girlfriend's an incredible influence on like fashion. She loves that. She tells me, oh, you should get this, you should get that. And she's just been the light of my life. We've been dating for 2 years now, and she's not only helped transform me, but I think the last 2 years I've gone through more growth, like individually in a spiritual level, whether that's through, where I'm where I spend my time, what I like to do from being with her. And I think that's shown to the world through just the little things, whether that's how you dress, how you show up, whatever it is. And I'm grateful for her when it comes to that. But, when I was 17, just even thinking back to the mentality, and I moved out at 18 years old. I moved from Virginia to Arizona. I had a media company that I was running out there with some of my good friends, and just going through that process. And this, to all the 17, 18-year-olds out there, it's a very challenging jump to make, and a lot of people never make it. I think we could all say we have friends that are maybe in their late 20s that haven't taken that leap of faith, whether that's on themselves, to really, really like just experiment. Like, am I made out for this, right? Whether that's starting a business, whether that's going into acting, whether that's just starting a new career path and ending something you've been doing for 6 years. Like, it's a challenge to make such a big transition in life. And I think that's all I've known since I was 17, whether that's moving to Arizona with my best friends with just a couple suitcases and say, hey, I'm going to figure this out. Where I think that like the exponential growth of the small things, like how a lot of the early interviews I've had, it's like this spiky haired 17-year-old that I still get joked around about from all these different guys that I know and hang out with. Yeah. And it's just like, it's like I've grown so much and I've learned so much. And I think that's a reflection of not only who I am, but, everyone around me, right? It's whether that's the people that are in my life today versus 5 years ago, like things change. And I think that's one of the biggest things I've really learned to love recently is, it's 2022, right? Like 2017, 2018 feels like yesterday to me. I'm 22 years old. And I think we can all say, just these last 2-3 years have felt like they've flown by with COVID, with everything, where it just brings perspective in my life of like, wow, you just got to keep the ball moving and continue to grow. If you're not growing, if people don't see change in you, I think everyone can improve. And I think that's for everyone around you as well. Like, you want to help people continue to grow and change. And if they don't change, like, if you're not growing, you're dying. So I think it's important.
One thing I talked about in my previous podcast was with my friend Zach about a concept called the voice. And the voice is this thing in the back of our head that tells us, you should really do a podcast, or you should really record that song, or you should keep going with that project, that passion project of yours. And what I've been so impressed by when I'm studying your story is that it doesn't seem like the voice has ever died. You've kept that voice alive. And it's really impressive because to do something for 5 years that is so core to your being is very difficult to do, because the outside influences are telling you, are you really doing that thing?
Yeah.
And then 3 years later, you're interviewing Larry King, and it's like, well, the voice is very strong at that point. Like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yep.
But how have you managed to keep that voice alive?
No, I love that. Like, that simple question I think is so powerful, because we all go through it. Like, some days you're having the best day and you're super excited about what you're doing, and some days you're like, why am I doing this? Like, this is not what I should be doing. It's a waste of time. And you go back and forth on the spectrum. And I think my podcast, this is an example here where I've been hosting it now for almost 5 years, and it's been through many ebbs and flows of at least how I think about it. And I think that's the most important thing here, where, there's the perspective of what the outside world thinks. There's what your friends and family think. There's what you think. Then there's what is, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is, I've had my podcast for 5 years. I put out an episode minimum once a week. And the show started off by literally me walking around in a circle on a pair of Apple headphones. And like, if you go down to my first podcast episode and it's like 2-3 minutes, I'm like, all right, welcome to, and it was called Rise of the Young. Welcome to the Rise of the Young show. My goal here on the show is to interview successful entrepreneurs. Like, we'll see how this goes. And then it was mainly Zoom interviews. Excuse me. And then it was interviews where I was like flying out to Miami to see Greene or LA to like show up somewhere and walk into someone's office, sit down and have them on the show and go back home. And then during COVID, it was mainly a lot of Zoom interviews again and not many in person. But the past year and a half, I think I had a moment where that question kept coming up where it's like, I love interviewing, and I've proven to myself that like with consistency, Larry King interview, all these great opportunities come up. And most importantly, like, I love having conversations. I love learning about people. I love the act of listening. Like, it's so fun for me being on the other side of the mic sometimes, because I really don't do it that much. And when you're interviewing, you're just spending 99% of your time listening, and I don't think unless you do it, people don't really understand that, where, you're on the other side of the mic, but you're just grasping all this knowledge and stories and experience, and whoever it's from, like, you're learning something no matter who it is. So I was coming back to this question, like, why am I doing this? Where do I want this to go? And my overall conclusion of the show, and I made a transition in the past a year and a half where one simple thing was the show name was initially called Rise the Young. Now it's the Casey Adams Show. And I made that transition, and I was back and forth on it for a while because, I started the show Rise the Young when I was 17. It was about bringing this youthful mindset or youthful perspective to entrepreneurship and interviewing a lot of successful entrepreneurs. But I felt like I outgrew, what that show meant to me. And I think that with everything, like your personal brand, your name is forever going to be with you. And I was like, I'm just going to switch the show name. And that simple thing, and I think a lot of people question this, like, oh, I've had this thing for so long. Why would I change the name? Like, rebrand, whatever. But a small thing like that, for me at least, just reinvigorates so much of my passion.
Wow.
And I think that, like, from that, I ended up doing this deal with an incredible podcast network called Blue Wire Studios out in Las Vegas. And I got introduced to them actually by David Meltzer. And it's this beautiful studio. You might have seen it before, but it's in the Wynn, Las Vegas.
Incredible.
And it's just this incredible, incredible studio. It's mainly a sports network. They have a portion of their business that's for business shows. And since last October, I've been going out to Vegas like usually once a month, maybe every other month, to do interviews. I'll fly out to Vegas. I'll do like 4 to 6 interviews in a day, sometimes over 2 days. And it's so fun for me because I finally have, similar to you, it's like this place where I can go to that I dedicate as my filming environment where I can host people. And I think I didn't know that something like that would change my perspective on the podcast, but it just reinvigorates the show for me. And I think that for me, like, I know I'll do the podcast for forever, for the rest of my life, whether it's getting 1 view on the episode and I do it once a month, or if it's getting 1 million an episode. I just know that the podcast for me is like, it's not about the views. It's not about the potential money making opportunity. It's just the consistency. It's like, I want to be 49 years old and say, hey, yeah, I've done 5,314 interviews since I was 17, and I know a lot of great people in my network. Like, yeah, come over to my house, and we have this cool studio. Let's do a podcast. Whether that's at my house, whether that's with Spotify in a Joe Rogan way, right? I'm so obsessed with the consistency of it, and just knowing that you could do this forever, right? It's something that I know it will never get old, and throughout life, I'm going to continue to want to learn about people, have great conversations, and put it out to the world so people can hear it. So for me, going back to your point of like that question coming into your mind, like, why are you doing this, or why are you spending the time on this passion project? I think it's just like figure out ways where you can reinvigorate a fire. Because I think, with anything, sometimes it's on fire and the whole thing's burning in a great way and you're so excited about what you're doing. Some days you can't even get the match to spark and you're trying so hard. And I think just like figuring out how to figure out that ebb and flow, because not every day is going to be the same amount of excitement. Not every day is going to be like, why am I doing this? And balancing that out and figuring out the small things to keep that fire inside of you in anything you do I think is very important. And sometimes it's a small change that will make a big difference, like rebranding the show in this perspective, or coming up with a different name, title, or having a different place to record, or even just like getting a new laptop that you can do better editing on. Like small things I think can make a huge difference when it comes to that fire inside.
Yeah, it's like sometimes like new running sneakers can get you to start running again, or Absolutely. Like a little thing. It could be like a new water bottle, right? Like,
yeah.
But you talk about switching from the Rise of the Young to the Casey Adams Show, and it's so interesting because in a previous interview you talked about the one weird thing about you is that you've always been older than your actual age. And it's like Rise of the Young, like you're 21 years old, like that's not the name anymore. Like you're still young is what some people might say, but it's like you're acting as if you're older in a sense. And it's like, when did you realize that about yourself, that, oh, I'm actually 17, but I'm not acting like the 17-year-olds around me?
Yeah, no, I think that it happened just organically over time, right? Yeah. And I think I do feel I turned 22 last week.
How old do you actually feel?
I mean, I feel 22, right? Like I feel like, because I look at it in two perspectives. It's like time on earth, right? Like I know I haven't been here that long, and I don't have the worldly experience to have that reflection of I'm 50 years old. Yeah. But on the flip side, like I know that, a lot of friends from back home and their siblings that are late 20s, early 30s, like and even sometimes like my parents, right? Like I've had more experience, whether that's from a simple thing like, traveling than my parents have over their entire life put together within the past year. And we talk about this all the time. Like I think that the age you feel is really quantified to the experience you have, whether that's in business, whether that's traveling, whether that's relationships. And I think that, I feel 22 years old because that's how, I haven't been out of high school for more than 5 years. So I feel that, and I can't speak to that else. Like I don't know what it feels like to say, yeah, I've been out of high school for 20 years, right? Because it feels like yesterday if you really put it in perspective. But I think that just how I think about the world and how I operate, I mean, I think I had the perspective shift probably when I was 16, just asking myself the big questions. It's like, what do I want to do for my career and why? Like, why are my parents doing what they do? Why aren't my brothers, looking for a different opportunity? And just seeing people around me go through the same motions, I think I just took a step back really when I was in that neck brace during that hard time for me to really ask myself, like, how can I completely transform my life from this moment? Because sports is not an option for me. I'm now on my phone all the time looking at different entrepreneurs and people and becoming obsessed with this whole world of marketing and advertising and business. Like, how can I really go do this? And I think that you have to take a step up into like your maturity. And I knew that in terms of, meeting people and talking to people, but it was a natural evolution, truthfully. Like, I think that we all go through things where you can reflect on like, oh wow, like that was maybe an immature thing I did, or oh, I wouldn't do that today. And I still learn that every single day. Like, we'll watch this interview in 5 years and be like, oh wow, like we've both grown, like we're 50 years old now in terms of that 5-year period. But yeah, I think that the maturity comes from just, even most importantly, the people that I'm spending time with and the mentors in my life, the people that I talk to. I think just having that perspective just slowly but surely gets downloaded into your mind and comes with a little edge of growth and maturity in business and relationships or whatever it is.
So Rick Ross comes up to you and says, "You're a boss." How does that feel? That is the most absurd. I've never seen Rick Ross give love like that.
Oh my
Admittedly,
God.
haven't seen many Rick Ross interviews, but like I saw this clip and dude, you're a boss. The way you approach this is incredible. Like, how does that feel in that moment of somebody of Rick Ross's stature telling you at 21 years old or 20,
Yes,
like, dude, you approach this like a beast. How does that feel?
Oh my God. This is so great that you're bringing this up. Because I posted this clip more so recently, and it's been on my Instagram and stuff a while back, but I just posted a reel recently, and it did super well. And it was for people that haven't seen it. It's, I asked Rick Ross, why did you take the time to be on my podcast? I was just curious, right? Like, it took a while to get it done, and I'll tell you how I did it. But then he goes through this whole thing, like, oh, you presented yourself like a boss, and then explains why. And, a couple of the key points that he talked about were just, what I said was something along the lines of, hey, Rick Ross, would love to have you on the podcast. I just interviewed, your good buddy, Robert Greene. I know you have a book coming out. Would love to have you on the show for 10 minutes to promote it. Let me know.
This is an email, a DM?
DM. And it was like DMs over time. So I remember I DM'd him a couple of times. He saw it, but it didn't get back to me. And then he was like, yeah, let's do it. And then he didn't get back to me. And then finally he's like, okay, email this or text this. And then we did it. But that message I sent him, I was very clear. And for someone like him or anyone that is busy and successful and running different companies, like, they value their time, and they're doing these podcasts to promote something they're doing, or maybe just tell their story, but they don't do this often, especially someone like Rick Ross. So I came to him and I brought up someone that he respected, Robert Greene. He talks about Robert Greene all the time, 48 Laws of Power. Like, he preaches Robert Greene all the time. So I just had Robert Greene on a couple weeks before I reached out to him. So I referenced him. And then I talked about his new book coming out and that I only needed 10, 15 minutes of his time to do the show. And that's why, he answered it and explained it like, you presented your boss, you presented yourself like a boss because you did this. And, it felt great, but I think just with him saying that, it's one thing to do it once, but just how do you continue to do that? And I think that's what I posted that clip recently because I was looking through old content and I saw that. I'm like, this is good to hear. And I always try to relive and take in the advice even from things 2-3 years ago, because I think it's easy to slowly, if you're not doing this, if you're not practicing the same things that got you to where you are, then you're not going to grow as fast. You know, I think that like messages like that and how I position things have led to a lot of bigger interviews. Not that, you know, someone connect me with someone, but just valuing someone's time, understanding what's important to them, and figuring out how you can help. And I think that I did that with him, and he seemed to appreciate it.
Yeah, I think people underestimate the influence when they're trying to connect with somebody. Think about who influences that person. Everybody looks up to somebody.
Yeah.
So how can you use that to your advantage to think about when you're reaching out to them? And it's something that we have to do a lot of, like, who does this person follow? Who do they care about? Who are they interested in?
Yeah.
And then use that in the pitch. And I think
Totally.
it doesn't just apply to podcasting.
Yeah,
It applies to anything.
Absolutely, everything in life. Like, if you want to run up to someone and say hi to them in the mall, like, and you're a fan of them, like, yeah, just figure out what are the connection points. Like, I always try to do that, to your point. And I think Instagram has helped this so much, where if I am about to go up to someone at some event, it's like, before I go up and introduce myself, I want to understand if there's any context. So it's like, do we follow someone mutually? Do we have any mutual connections? Like, what are the things that I can instantly start the conversation with? Because if you do, you just instantly create a sense of comfort, where it's like, oh, hey, like, I saw you follow D, he's a good friend of mine, whatever, and you just instantly get to go deeper than like, oh, how are you? Hey, it's you break through that surface level conversation and get right into the depth of how do you know this person? Oh my God, he's been great to me, or she. Where I think context in any instant conversation and relationship is super important, and especially when you're DMing people where they're getting tons of them. If you find a way to break through that glass of, you know, just another DM, but someone that cares and, you know, draws some connections to you, I think it's a good thing. And whether that's podcasting or whatever it is.
Yeah. You mentioned your superpower is developing and nurturing relationships. And I feel like it's very common for people to make connections in today's day and age, but to go deeper is another added nuance of a skill that I think you've mastered. How do we best develop and nurture connections?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think, you know, the superpower of building relationships, I think, has truthfully came natural to me, but I also think it takes a lot of work. And I'm not perfect at this. I try to get better every day. Because over the years, I realized that you just continue to meet more people. And it's like, if you scale that until you're, you know, in your 50s, 60s, 70s, especially if you're going to events and having companies and raising money, like, you meet so many people where it gets challenging. You really have to, like, stay on top of it, right? But I think building relationships comes down to one thing, is that's just caring about someone, like caring about the time you spend with them. Are you actually paying attention? Caring about what they care about, like figuring out ways you can help. And I think that that's always how my mind works. If I meet someone and they, you know, or if you're ever in Vegas and want to do a podcast at a studio, it's like, oh, how can I help you shoot a show there, like at the Blue Wire? Like, I always try to draw parallels of, like, what's important to them, how can I help them, and when I am with them or speaking to them, like, spend time. I think that people are very easy to meet a lot of people but not be present. And I actually think, like, the couple conversations I've had with Gary Vaynerchuk, he's taught me that from afar. Just the level of presence he has, at least with me personally, when I've spoken to him, has just been so dialed in, and I appreciate that. Whether that's 30 seconds of saying hello and talking about something and he's like, gotta go, but like that 30 seconds is not him on his phone chit-chatting, and they kind of just like, yeah, like he was actually there. And I think that in any relationship, presence and quality time is important, whether that's in, you know, a relationship like with your significant other, with your family, with friends, with business colleagues. Appreciating that time and actually being present is one thing, but on the other hand, it's how do you keep it top of mind, right? Like, there's a lot of people that I probably haven't spoken to in a long time, but if I always try to practice this, and well, actually one of my buddies, Nick Dio, he works alongside Gary, he posted something recently that I have tried to do more of, where it's like, when you're going on Instagram and you're watching Instagram stories, I'm sure we all go watch a couple Instagram stories every day. Instead of going to watch 50 Instagram stories in a short period of time, try to respond to someone's Instagram story with a quality message about their day or about what they posted, because they obviously cared enough to post it. And you'd be surprised with the amount of great conversations that come from that. Even with people that you haven't talked to in a long time, it's a great just touch point. And I think that, you know, social media is obviously a phenomenal place to continue to nurture relationships, but showing up and doing the in-person thing is always always a pleasure. Like even one of my good friends, Colby Tucker, he's actually in New York right now. I've known him for 5+ years. And I had my birthday out in Michigan recently, and he flew out there to show up in Michigan for a couple of days. And I appreciate that, right? It's like he didn't have to do that. He's busy. But things like that, like going the extra mile in relationships, I believe is how you build just a very deep bond with someone. And I try to do that in multiple ways with different people.
How do we do that? I find it really difficult to do that sometimes when I spend a lot of time on social media, which makes it more impressive what Gary Vaynerchuk has been able to do with being direct focus. When I spend a lot of time scrolling, I'm like in a different world almost, it feels like. So like, have you had that issue at all of consuming a lot and it affecting your personality, or how have you managed to not let it if you haven't?
I don't think I have. I think that in a perfect world, our whole team for MediaKits is remote, and I was gonna say that in a perfect world, like I love the in-person aspect of everything. I love shaking hands. I love talking to people. I think it's draining at times too, of like super long events. Like I've hosted dozens of events in my day, and they're so exciting. By the end of the day, though, I'm just drained because I put everything into quality conversations, paying attention, or at least I try to the best of my ability. But I think that with social media, I've always tried to keep it very separate in terms of like how I live my life. I use it as a tool. Like every time I go on there, I try to be not a consumer, but a producer, whether that's through, as you mentioned earlier, commenting on people's posts, responding to DMs. I probably spend 80% of my time on Instagram just in DMs, whether that's like chatting with people, asking questions, reaching out to people for the podcast. And I think that that's just always been a way to build with people, right? If I'm sending 10 messages a day, 20 messages a day, just super brief, short, back and forth with people, over the course of a year, like you're sending a lot of messages and having conversations. And if some of them aren't turning anything, it's like you're creating those touch points with people, and you're showing them that you do care. And I think that's important. But to your point though, like scrolling on social, I mean, there's definitely moments where I'm like, okay, I just was on social for too long, and I need to check out and like get back to work in a sense. Yeah. But I try to not let it consume me. And if I am going on there and scrolling on reels or looking at posts, I just try to look at it for what it is. Like if someone's posting their travel pictures and they're somewhere, it's like, how can I like go to the city, like check out the city where they are, and maybe Google it, like what's cool to do there. I try to like go deeper rather than just scroll and look and and stuff. I try to learn as I'm on social, instead of just be a consumer.
Yeah, that's a good way to be. And you mentioned MediaKits before. What is MediaKits for those who are unfamiliar, and how's been the experience in this economic downturn? And like, is it affected you at all, or
Not too much, no. So I mean, for people that don't know, MediaKits, we launched the company last August of 2021, and it's the easiest way for creators to create a media kit with real-time data and analytics. And for people that don't know what a media kit is, it's more so your digital resume, or your resume for a creator, for a social media creator, for a musician, for a blogger, for an athlete. And what we've done is create a simple product where creators can connect their social accounts, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube, connect it directly through the first-party APIs, and create a beautiful media kit that consists of things like your headshot, your bio, your contact email, and then put together in a beautiful way within 30 seconds. Because the problem that we were initially looking to solve is, if you're looking to create a media kit, let's say a brand knocks on your door, sends you an email saying, hey, we'd love to work with you. Send us your press kit or your media kit. Typically, creators over the years, and I'll go back to the origin story. Kieran and I, my co-founder, one of our good friends, he still is big automotive YouTuber. His name's JR Garage. Back in 2017, 2018, he got hit up by Pennzoil, and they said, hey, we'd love to do a brand deal with you. Can you send me your media kit? And he ended up saying, hey guys, you guys are in marketing. Can you make a media kit for me? So we're like, sure, send us screenshots of your analytics on YouTube, on Instagram, on all these different platforms, and then we're going to, go to Canva, Photoshop, turn these screenshots into a beautiful digital resume that you can send over to them. Took us a couple hours, we did it. And then 3 weeks later, Ferrari contacted Jeff and said, hey, can you send us your media kit? We'd love to fly you down to Daytona Beach, Florida, and do this brand activation. So Jeff calls us frantically, guys, oh my God, I need you to update my media kit. All my numbers are outdated. I've had a couple viral videos. I want to change the colors, all this stuff. Can you go update this for me? So we're like, sure. So we're changing 1s to 2s and 3s to 4s. And that's really when we asked ourselves, why isn't there a way for creators to create a media kit that never gets outdated in terms of the numbers? And then more so, why isn't there a trusted way for brands to see creator data at scale? And that's when we had this idea back in 2017, 2018. But my co-founder and I at the time, we ended up shelving the idea because I was in high school. We both had our own things going on. I was starting my podcast. He had a marketing agency. So we shelved the idea. And then fast forward to 2020, COVID's happening. TikTok's really starting to blow up. And we're seeing a lot of these other creator economy companies starting to come out of nowhere. And this whole phrase creator economy and social influencing is not only growing, but it's growing exponentially.
Yeah.
So we're like, this would be a great time to, zone in on this idea and actually go launch a tech startup. So 2020, we just started ideating, started hiring a designer to design the product. And then from the middle of 2020 to the beginning of 2021, really just went all in on it. We raised a family and friends round last year, raised $1.25 million. Obviously hired some incredible people to the team. Then we launched the company in August of last year, did a big launch party in LA. We had Wiz Khalifa come out and perform. Yeah. He's actually a partner and his manager's an investor. So that's been super cool to see. But, the product, it's been very well received. We're the industry leading media kit creation tool where we have over 25,000 creators on our platform that are consistently using it on a monthly basis. And, our tool is built as more so like a set it and forget it tool, right? Like your media kit is something, it's a tool in your tool belt. And for us, it's just the beginning of more so what we're building outside of just the media kit tool. But it's been phenomenal. I've learned a lot. The tech world is new to me. Raising capital was new to me. And the last year, from a business perspective, I've learned more than I have within the past 4 just from this experience, and truly grateful for it. And, our team just is phenomenal. We're a very small team. We have a team of 8, and they just do incredible work, and I love working with them, and it's been quite the ride so far.
What I love about the site is it seems like it's so professionally organized, and even the lowercase letters is unbelievable.
Thank you.
But
I appreciate you for pointing that out.
Yeah, no, it's really wonderful stuff. But I think we're out of time, unfortunately. There's so much I want to talk to you about. Maybe we'll have to do a part 2 to hear how MediaKits is going and just everything else you're up to. But thank you so much for your time, and where can we connect with you further?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on the show today. It's been such a pleasure. But where to connect with me, I would say the best on Instagram is just @Casey. And then, of course, I'm on social everywhere. You can put some links down below. Twitter is where I spend a lot of time now. Obviously, TikTok. But the podcast, if you want to listen, I'm sure if you're listening this far, you appreciate interviews. So the Casey Adams Show, iTunes, Spotify, or YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast, would appreciate everyone if they checked it out. But thanks so much for having me on today. This is great.
Absolutely. We'll link it all below. Appreciate you, bro.
Absolutely. Thank you.